Hello everyone, my name is Chris Wamalwa and I'm your host for this show, View from the Top. And in this episode today, we're going to be discussing about politics. Barely 4 months away from the elections. This period between now and the end of the month, we're going to be witnessing scenes from Kenya of nominations, mainly affecting major parties, the main parties, the Jubilee Coalition, and CORD under the NASA coalition, and to discuss the roundup of what's going on at home, what has happened during this past week, and what gives us an indication of what's yet to come. Two Kenyans living here in the US. I have, as always, on my far right, Anthony.makokha, our regular panelist, and I also have the privilege of hosting again this week, Collins Odongo, a professional who's done a lot of work in the field of peace and development. Collins Odongo is based in Maryland, DC area. Gentlemen, welcome to our show. Thank you. Collins, let's start with you. You've seen pictures from Kenya and reports about what's yet to come and what's likely to happen, taking an example from what happened to Busia. As a Kenyan who has followed that, the politics of Kenya and the issues of nominations, can you just bring us up to speed on what's currently happening in Kenya right now?
Thank you, Mr. Wamalwa. I have to start by relaying my condolences to those who passed on during the nomination. It is quite unfortunate that we have to lose lives for a political process that is meant to help us get good leaders to run the country. Just to take it on, first of all, I think the nomination process is a testament of how ill-prepared our parties are in terms of management. Two, is also an indication on how our leadership is still not matured in terms of democracy, especially when it comes to party management and ideologies. Parties are supposed to be run through manifestos, but I think the major challenge is that there seem to be poor planning in terms of operationalization of the parties, in terms of the calendar of events. Usually, nominations are usually conducted towards the electioneering period, and I think this is a wake-up call to our leaders that our parties needs to be rooted on the democratic process of doing nominations as a routine, so that it doesn't become a one-off event. Secondly, I would have to say that you watched what happened in Migori and Busia. And I think one thing that we want to echo is that our leaders must understand that peace is not an option, especially in this current scenario where life has become very fragile. Our leaders must come to understand that they have just been given the mandate. And I think we must be honorable enough to accept the verdict of the people so that the sense of entitlement can be demystified. Thank you.
David, Busia County is very tricky in the sense that you have the population on the left side, on the right side, from the Teso community, substantial Tesos, and then you have the rest of the Luyas on this other side. And how do you think the politics that played out last week are going to impact the general elections? Because in essence, you're almost like pitting two communities, two tribes against each other. How do you think that is going to play out in the main elections?
Thank you, Chris. First of all, I'd like to say that what Mr. Collins has said is right. The only thing is putting the responsibility on the leadership will not solve the problem. we have to put the responsibility on the citizenship, because the citizens must understand that they are hiring people to work for them. And therefore, if it's a job application process, there should be no reason why a citizen should go fight. Okay? Because the loss of life, every time there's a loss of life when there is during the electioneering, we blame the leaders. But we need to look at the citizenry and see how they understand what they are getting into. So, moving that to Busia. Busia, first of all, let's be realistic. There are the Luyas on one side, there are the Teso on one side, but the Luyas have other counties. They have Kakamega, they have Busia, they have Bungoma, they have Marago, they have Vihiga, and they have even Trans-Nzoia. The Tesos have only one. Okay, and they will need to feel that they are part of the country if they get involved. So I say it as if you always must take care of the minority in a sense. Because if this is the only chance for them to be able to get a governor, then they should be given the opportunity to get a governor if that makes them get involved in the governance of the country. So I see that the party that nominates a Teso person in Busia will be able to carry that county. So if it turns up that only Teso is in Cord or is in Jubilee, he will win the county, and the county will carry over to the national. So I know there is that feeling that democracy is the rule of the majority, but the rule of a majority without considering the minority is not a representative government.
Collins, what's your views on that?
I partially agree with him. You see, our geographical expansity, especially within the counties, was really not demarcated scientifically. Originally, the 8 provinces were more, geographically demarcated. But out of the 47 counties that exist, there's no equal distribution of the population. So, in order to create a cohesive living, cohesive representation, the majority must have a say and minority also must have a say. How do they do that? They have to come with a compromise, but it must be bottom-up approach. I think the main problem that is coming, that is creating a lot of polarity and polarization, is the fact that there's been a postponement of the process. And I think this is going even to affect the NASA, for example. Until now, they still treat the presidential candidate nominee as a secret. This is creating more tension and witch-hunting, because these people are known. Musalia is known, Raila is known, Wetangula is known, Kalonzo is known. But they still believe they want to treat the process as secret. How does a political process become a secret?
That's very important because, David, we've seen what has happened. Recently, we had demonstrations in Kakamega for those who feel that Mudavadi is being left out in the selection and election process. But what does that speak of our democracy if we can't really appreciate that? If we can't believe that the process is going to be even fair, if we all have to insist that one of us has to be there.
It speaks to I have to use the word immaturity of the process. First of all, the citizenry do not understand that only one person can win. And sometimes you have to give a little to win a lot. So you cannot say you need your person, only your person to win. That's when we go to the extent that when somebody wins, if you are not the one who won, then they must have rigged. So I think NASA, to me, is doing itself a disservice. And I still hold the opinion that Mr. Raila will see the light and make sure that he becomes the kingmaker and not the king. But I stand corrected. I think they need to be able to be honest and upfront with their voters, so that their voters can get acclimatized to the results. Because if they wait until very late, like in July is when they are rolling out their candidate, people will vote. And if people run away from the party when it's too late, you can't do a correction. So whoever strategist is telling them to keep everything under wraps until very late on, you can only do that if you can tie people down. If it was election by delegates, you can keep quiet because the delegates have already been voted, and you can hold 20 people and say, hey, vote like this. But this is the election by the general public, and the general public need to be used to the fact that this is the nominee. We need to get used to it.
Collins, of course, the way things are happening, NASA is not going to hold elections to choose the presidential bearer. So that's why they're going through that negotiated process. In your view, given that that is not going to happen, they're not going to subject that to popular vote. In your view, who do you think should be the flag bearer for NASA tickets in the coming presidential elections?
Brother Wamalwa, that's very tricky because by default, I happen to come from one of the tribes in the country. So I don't want to be biased to either of them. Every one of them has an equal mandate. The only thing that I would appeal to all of them, that Kenya is bigger than either of them. And I think the country has a lot of expectation, because if you look at with due respect to the Jubilee government, I really respect President Uhuru. He's tried his best, he's doing his best. However, based on the way the dynamics of the politics is going, there seems to be total confusion on both sides, to an extent that they talk of underperformance. The opposition talk about the underperformance of the government. The government talk about the underperformance of the opposition. All these guys have been in government for all this long. All of them. Because Raila has been in government, but he was being deputized by who? Musalia and Uhuru. So technically, one cannot say that you've been in government more than the other. Same to Mudavadi. Same to Kalonzo. Kalonzo has been the vice president in the Nusumkati government. So all this guy, and Ruto, with the Kanun 92, all those names have been there all that long. So I think they must accept the reality that they are Kenyans who want the mandate to make a difference. My main concern is this. The debate is being shifted to very simplistic approach. The cost of living is very high. The level of corruption has skyrocketed. I have to say Jubilee government they've done something, but they need to be interrogated in terms of what they've done. Have they invested the value, the return on investment forward?
You said they've done something. What is it that they've done?
They've done a lot of launching of projects, so they claim. But in terms of, when you talk about investment, like the borrowing, the borrowing has been high, and it has reached a ceiling that is worrying. But the justification is that all the borrowed money has been channeled to investment. But when you look at the return on investment, because to me it's not about investment, it's about the return on investment. Is it the return for the value of money being invested? Is it really worth what is being used? I think those are some of the dynamics that our citizenry needs to interrogate our leaders, so that it doesn't become a Raila Uhuru contest. It doesn't become Kalonzo Uhuru contest. It doesn't become Davadi Uhuru contest. It needs to be looked in totality, the kind of country that we want to, propel, And I think because of the tribalism that has been so encroached, everybody wants their son to be there. But I think in a nutshell, Brother Wamalwa, this is a replica of the boardroom politics. It is no longer the citizenry politics, a boardroom politics, where people are promised, and that's why you see the demonstration is. It's just like going for you want to marry a good lady, but every time you send a mystery, it comes with very high hopes. Oh, that lady really likes me. I've been promised this and that. So you see, they want the promises to be lived up to. We don't know what they're discussing in the boardroom. It's not a structured dialogue. So technically, it becomes very difficult. And you see the anxiety outside there for the common citizen who is supposed to be voting for them. It's also increasing.
David, there seem to be very high stakes on these coming elections. Right from the grassroots, from the MCA to the presidency, what does that speak to the specter of violence? Because the signs are already there now. We can see them.
Okay. Okay. First of all, I'd like to take slight exception to the fact that there is a lot of corruption in Kenya, because corruption is a little relative, and we sort of talk about it, throwing out there to all African countries as the corrupt. But I've lived in the United States long enough to know that everybody's not clean. It just depends on the perception you put out there. So I know that the country is not efficient, it's not perfect, but I do not think it's risen to a level where it's completely basket case. I think there are some people who need to be cleaned up, just like there are some people in this country who need to be cleaned up, in this government, particularly in Trump government, everybody. So we need to be very careful about how we represent our country, the countries that we come from, because it's like more reporting somebody, telling somebody that your mom is a witch or something like that, and what do they think about you? So I'd like to take an exception to that, make sure that we betray an image. Like, I am American, I'm Kenyan, but I don't think that one is better than the other, because I know both countries and they have...
David, definitely America is better than Kenya when it comes to corruption. You can't say that you can compare.
No, not definitely. I think that the America is better in making sure that the people who are corrupt are punished. That's the part that we need to work on. Meaning, the corruption is not an African thing. Non-punishment of people who are corrupt may be that a lot of Africans escape with it, and that's one thing we need to handle. You understand? It's not that it's a specific problem of Africa, because the word corruption is actually not African. Anyhow, that's being beside the point, because let me go back to the question of how the country is gearing up towards the election and the specter of violence. The Kenyans themselves need to know that they do not have anybody in the world to protect them or to speak for them at all, because I do not see a situation where Donald Trump is going to stand and say, hey, stop fighting yourself. So they need to live up, they need to know that this is a job they are trying to give somebody, and any one person elected is a Kenyan. So they should stop, they should look at themselves in the mirror and know that every 5 months they cannot be wanting to go at each other's throat so that somebody else can come and stop them.
Collins, you've studied peace and development for a long time. What are the trends? What are the signs that there's trouble ahead? Or are we just panicking for no good reason?
Actually, Brother Wamalwa, the trends of war does not even require any academic analogy. It's as basic as the way you can say it. If you look at the proclamation of our leaders, the responsible utterances, the parochial outbursts, the nomination is a replica of what is going to happen during election. And it's going to be twice as much as that, in the sense that our leaders have forgotten. You see, leadership is about being in the consciousness of what leadership is all about. A leader is somebody that is looked up to for hope, for reconciliation, not for despair. And it is a position that requires a lot of sobriety. But if you look at both the opposition and the government, they're not in control. A leader must be in control. A leader is somebody who's ahead of others. Look at the NASA team, for example. Look at the way Joe bashes at the president every day. To me, that is not what leadership is all about. Because technically, he needs to talk about his manifesto. He needs to talk about the things that he's going to do. Look at the reaction of the president. He has to react that way from a human perspective. So it becomes a contestation between the Mombasa county government and the president. And you see along that line, the real debate is lost. And what is the real debate? The real debate is service delivery to the citizenry. Look at the other day the budget was passed. The budget is passed, and if you look at the content of that budget from the financial perspective, it's a budget that is election-toned, the way I looked at it. Because it's not addressing the basics of what a budget needs to address. It has some element that is kind of trying to, woo the electorate, but it's not going to be sustainable. So I think we really have to go for the hard part of sacrifice. If Kenya is to stand as a country, the leadership must take responsibility. And when I'm talking about leadership, it's not about the government. It's about both the government and the opposition.
David, just following up on that same thing, do you think Kenyans are just panicking? That because right now people are saying that given the trends, given what's going on, the indications are all that what happened in 2007, 2008, post-election violence is going to be child's play compared to what is to happen during these elections, because the stakes are even more higher than they were those days.
They are not worrying for nothing, and they should worry, because if they don't worry, they cannot do anything about it. Because if somebody is driving to a cliff and they are not worried, they will drive over the cliff. So I think Kenyans need to worry that it could be worse if they go at the rate they are going. So I think if it's from MCA to governor to the national to presidency, and everybody is worrying that this could be worse, they need to slow down and look at themselves in the mirror. In the case of Job in Mombasa, I think, unfortunately, it's the president's responsibility to calm it down, because he's the chief executive. Because if you are a lesser leader and you can go toe-to-toe with somebody who's higher, you raise your profile. You understand? So the governor in Mombasa is raising his profile. That's politics. Okay? But the president, human or not, holds the responsibility to make sure that the tone and the tenor in the election and in the government, whether he loses or wins, he has a responsibility to hand over a country or continue ruling or administering a country that is proper. So with that responsibility, he needs to be able to realize that he holds dual responsibility as a candidate and as the president.
Collins, you are a student of peace. Given that as we enter now the electioneering period proper, we are not going to have Big Brother America looking after us, because there are all indications that Trump is least concerned about what happens to countries like Kenya. We will have the British. We won't have the ICC to act as a deterrence. What do you think Kenyans should do to avoid a situation where there's all-out war arising out of elections?
Personally, if I had the opportunity, Brother Wamalwa, there are two fundamental things that is a replica of peace. If leaders would begin to start campaigning along policies, along manifestos, and if they could have joint sessions, that would demonstrate a very clear maturity. I'm looking forward to a day when the president would be campaigning with the opposition in the same platform, and everybody hearing their policies, and people clapping and people going home. But that is still far for us. as a country. Personally, the way I look at it is this: peace is not an option. Peace is a way of life. And we tend to look at it from the point of its absence. It can be very detrimental if a replica of the 207 happens in the 2017, because it might not give this common man the opportunity to do what they're supposed to do. Personally, loss of life is not a requirement for leadership. So I think our leaders must rise to the occasion and agree that the country is bigger than all of them. And the only way is to begin to tone down. And many a times it's not even the leaders themselves, it's their cronies. Look at, the henchmen are the ones who are really drumming the beating the drums of war. They're demonizing other leaders when they campaign. They make a caricature of others, But look at it this way. Out of the 40-something million now, plus, Kenyans, they are all taxpayers who fund the government for its operation, both for the local government, for the county government, and also for the national government. And I think it is important, it's incumbent upon both the opposition and the government to appreciate that this contest is not about only being at the top.
Who are contesting? Raila and Uhuru and Kalonzo and Musalia, all these guys are friends. Yeah, they're very, very close friends. In fact, some of them are business partners. But always, it's the little man who fights on their behalf. And it doesn't happen only in Africa. We've seen it even in the places like America. What do you think should happen? How do we go about educating people that you don't have to fight for this guy, because after all, he's okay.
That is the $1 million question, because the leaders of the candidates, and I'll withdraw that term, the candidates seem to enjoy the fracas that happens. You understand? But I think what we are missing is a structure in the country that keeps it running, whether people are campaigning or not. You understand? If the police are not political, if the civil service is not political, unfortunately, it became politicized long time ago during Moi's time. But a civil service is supposed to be apolitical. It's supposed to be a structure that some politician convinces the people and vote him so that he can implement these policies, but in that structure. So that if the police were apolitical, and anybody committing a crime, whether they are candidate or they are citizen, they are held accountable. And in this particular case, in this election, that is very important, because the country will rest on what the civil servants and the candidates will do. If it collapses in their hands, then it's their responsibility, because this is 5-year cycle, and the election is supposed to be taken care of, like the election commission, like the police, like all the other structures that are supposed to be in place. The courts are supposed to be in place. They are supposed to be apolitical. So the only way we can make sure that this doesn't go on is to make sure that the structures are not apolitical, and the people in the structures don't think that they'll get benefit from a specific person being elected president.
Brother Wamalwa, just to interject, one element that I think is bringing more confusion, the cabinet secretaries don't need to campaign for the Jubilee. I think it's a great disservice to that government, because what they've done speaks for itself. An attempt to involve the public's, servants into their campaign strategy portrays them on a false light. And I think it is something that needs to be relooked, because it's going to polarize the government, the country for nothing. So my real appeal to President Uhuru is that he really need to crack the whip be the big brother, big man, of the country, live up to the, above the parochial debate of some of the uninformed opposition, because some of the opposition members are also confused if you look at even the way they're running around. So if he can live above them and give that guidance, and be in touch with the structures that are there that are supposed to take control of the country, I think then things will be very peaceful.
Yes, Leslie, I think we cannot stress this enough, because if the structures don't hold, there is nobody out here who's going to help them. So the thing, we have to disperse that idea that we shall get help from overseas. Help is within that country, okay? And the citizens themselves and the leadership themselves need to make sure that they don't go over the cliff, because it's easier to destroy a country than build one.
Unfortunately, elections are competition, so the prospects of those guys coming together, talking to each other, are very slim. But that's withstanding, I think, like David says, it behoves Kenyans themselves to advocate for peace and make sure that they maintain peace. Because if that country burns, most of these guys have their choppers ready, waiting for them to ship them out of the country and leave the ordinary people to suffer. Because we've been discussing the Kenyan politics, the specter of violence as the electioneering period gets underway. And we've been doing this with, as usual, our panelist, David.makokha, and we also had the privilege of hosting today in the studio one of Kenyans living here in the US, who's done some work in peace and development, Collins Odongo from the state of Maryland. And that is it for today. My name is Chris Wamalwa. I'll see you again next week.